Yes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this great day. It is the launch of our first 2021 title for Istros Books. It's called With an Unopened Umbrella in the Pouring Rain, and it's by Ludovic Bruckstein. This is the second work we've published by Bruckstein. And today, 27th of January, is designated as the International Holocaust Memorial Day. And as our discussion goes on, the viewers will be able to understand why we've decided to launch it today. I'm very pleased to have with me Ludovic Bruckstein, the author's son, Freddie Bruckstein, coming to us from Haifa in Israel. Welcome, Freddie.
Hello, I'm pleased to be here with you, Susan.
Excellent. So, of course, my first question to you is going to be, could you please give our viewers a little bit of an introduction to who your father was and the circumstances of his life and work?
Okay, so my father was a writer, and he lived in a little town in the north of Transylvania, in the district of Maramuresh, the little town was called Sighetul Marmației, Sighet. And this town was a very, very lively and beautiful town, as there are as many towns in Transylvania are. And the fate of the Jewish community of this town in the Holocaust was terrible. There were about 13,000 Jews that lived in the town, and during the month of May in 1944, they were transported in 4 long train transports to Auschwitz. And from these 13,000 at the end of the war, you know, in May 1945, the war ended. There remained only about 2,500 people from this entire community. So it is the story of the obliteration of an entire community of people of Jewish people in this town. And my father was one of the members of this community. He went to Auschwitz. He was deported to Auschwitz together with his father, mother, and 2 sisters. His brother was deported from a different town because he was with his grandparents. And from the entire family, only my father and his brother survived. After returning from the camps, you know, the people that survived this deportation were those who were selected for work. They were sent to other camps, working camps, and they did a lot of work. And actually, many people perished during the work in these camps, but a few of them survived, as I said, and those that survived partly came back to the town to look for their relatives. Part of them left to other countries. So my father returned from the camps, and in 1947 he got married to my mother, and he also started writing. He always wanted to write, but this shocking experience sort of intervened, and he started to write a play because he heard of an uprising at the Auschwitz Sonderkommando, and this moved him very much because he had the feeling that this whole tragedy was also in part due to the fact that the community did not revolt. Okay, there was they sort of these entire communities, they just went there, and there was no active resistance at all. And when he heard that there was some active resistance, that moved him very much, and so he wrote a play called Nachtschicht, and this play was played by was staged by the Jewish theater in Bucharest after the war, and it was a great success. And following this play, he became a rather known writer in Romania, in Romanian circles. So he went to the university in Bucharest, where he met other writers. So he was in the milieu of Romanian writers. Then in 1970, my father wanted to join his brother, who also survived, and who immigrated to Israel around 1947-48. And due to his immigration to Israel, the communist Romanian government sort of made him disappear from the Romanian literary scene. His plays were not played anymore. Books that were due to be published were not published anymore, and so forth. So he had to continue his work in Israel, which he actually did. So this is my father.
Yes, and this fact of his kind of disappearance or being wiped out from the Romanian literature, this will explain to many people, I think, who are listening, who have not heard his name before. But you undertook the role of the PR role, the role of kind of publisher in a way, by instigating the translation of his work into Hebrew and French, and now, of course, into English. And can you tell us how that came about, the genesis, for example, of this book and the previous publication, The Trap? I know they've both been published in France and in Israel in Hebrew. Can you tell us when you started to do that, how the process went, what was the reaction?
Well, we were very good friends with my father. He was telling me lots of stories. He was really a very amazing person. He was very communicative, and he liked to tell stories. So he told me the story of his family and the story of what happened to him during the Holocaust. And he continued to write in Israel for the Romanian press, and and he actually continued to publish his books in his own publishing company that he established, which was called Panopticum. He continued to publish them in Romanian. Then in Israel, several of his books were translated and published into Hebrew. But he always told me that he is frustrated for having books in Romanian actually not published in Romania, and therefore the community really didn't reach the ones that spoke the language. And in Israel, he was considered an Israeli writer who writes in Romanian, so he was like a different kind of a writer. He was not a Hebrew writer. And he was never published in major languages, and this frustration went with him actually up to his grave. So he actually died in 1988 of cancer, and he couldn't see his things published in full. So after he died, there was one more book of his that was in preparation, so it was published in Hebrew. And then I also found his best translator, Yotam Reuveni, who also republished all his retranslated and republished all his books in Hebrew, so that they will be available. And then when I was in France, I'm a professor of computer science, so I do a lot of trips abroad, and I collaborate with people in various countries. So in France, I actually found out that there is a very good translator from Romanian into French, Paula Benz-Fauci, who translated Caragiale, for example, into French. So I asked her to have a look at my father's work, and if she considers them good enough, then she should translate them. So she was very happy to. I was very happy that she found the books very interesting and good, and she translated them. So they were published in Paris at Caractère. And then when I visited Romania on some mathematical conferences, a good friend of mine from Romania, Elena Ovreu, who is a professor at the Polytechnic, found for me the best translator from Romanian literature into English, and this was Alistair Ian Blythe. And I contacted Alistair Ian Blythe, and again the same story repeated. I sent him the books, and Alistair very kindly accepted to undertake the translations. And it was through Alistair that I met Susan, and the rest is history. And I'm very, very happy that his books are now available in French, and they will be made available in English too.
Yes, yes. It's a great pleasure to work with Alistair. He's also done other translations for Istros, and he is indeed an excellent translator from Romanian to English. We've had quite a good reaction with the first book, The Trap, which was reviewed in the TLS, and we hope this time we're expecting a joint review of both The Trap and this new book in the Jewish Chronicle very soon, and hopefully other places too. There's also a wonderful interview with you about your father's life and work in the Calvert Journal, which I would like to recommend that some viewers go to if they want to find out more information. How were the books received in France? Did they get reviewed widely? Do you know about that?
We participated in with Edition Caractère. We participated in a Salon de Littérature. There is every year a big Salon de Littérature, and Characters, Edition Caractères, they are trying to promote the books, and they are selling them there. There were some reviews in the French publications that are of Jewish interest, of course, and also in some other newspapers. You know, we are not undertaking a very, very strong campaign of promoting it as we actually perhaps should in France. That's probably due to the fact that neither the editor nor me, we have a lot of time to do it. We are concentrating now on the English versions, because the English versions have a much wider audience, and you know.
Yes, I hope the English version.
America and Australia for the readership.
Yes, I hope the English version will bring a lot of new readers. I know that we've had some interest from an Italian publisher, because in fact there is a story, isn't there, in the collection about the Italian division. It was a real life division that was based in Sighet during the Second World War. Here, your father calls it the Vesuvio division, But that wasn't actually the correct name, was it? What was the name of the division that was there?
The name was Pasubio. The division was called the Divisione Pasubio. And my father told me the story of this division. There was a moment, you know, the town of Sziget was the center for railroad traffic. You know, there was a big railroad station in that place, and therefore, at some point in time, there were three armies that were stationed in this town: the Hungarian army, the German army, and the Italian army. They were stationed in Sziget in preparation for going to the Russian front. And during that time, surprisingly, in the town, the life went on normally. It was only in 1944 when the Germans actually occupied Hungary and actually took control over the things that were happening there. It was only then that the Jews were rounded up. So until then, pretty much there were some anti-Jewish legislation, but their life was almost undisturbed. And during that time, when these three armies were stationed in town, my father got to meet them. You know, they actually saw them around. They actually knew what was happening, and so in a very interesting way, my father got friendly with a soldier from the Italian army, and they were having discussions, and the Italian army was very full of life, and they were playing mandolins in town, and it was a very nice and lively group of people, whereas the Hungarians were very reglementary and the Germans were extremely militaristic, you know. So you could see the characters of the three different armies in these things. So this is what is described in this story, which became the Il Divisione Vesuvio, which my father changed.
One of my favorite stories in the book, because
yes, it's a very interesting story. It has lots of interesting side stories, and I think the Italians will very much like it, because their soldiers come out to be very humane and interesting, and actually reluctant to go to this unnecessary and stupid campaign. Actually, it is very sad. This Divisione Pasubio was completely obliterated at the Don River during the war.
Yes, and in fact, this is most of the stories in the book, in fact, give us a glimpse of life in the town, and everyday life, marriages, deaths, you know, whatever's going on in everyday life. But then most of them end with this fact of deportation in 1944. Yes. Yeah. So I know that you would like to do a reading from one of the stories. You've chosen a little excerpt from the end of the story, Matriarchy. You're going to read in Romanian, I'm going to read in English. Who would you like to go first?
I would like you to go first.
Okay, off I go then. On the 16th of May 1944, two gendarmes with cockerel feathers in their caps, armed with heavy carbines and cartridge belts, entered the Dreispan family home, wearing their big boots, polished in a regulation fashion, heedless of the slippers by the front door. Really Despan, small and thin, with her hair tied in a tall bun on the top of her head, Daniel, her taciturn, mountainous husband, and Ronnie, their son, who had recently reached the age of 19 and who had passed his baccalaureate with exceptional marks, were taken from their spotlessly clean house and loaded onto cattle trucks with planks and barbed wire nailed over the ventilation windows. Each of the 43 cattle trucks carried 70 souls and a bucket of water, which is to say 3,010 souls in all. The train set in motion, its metal creaking. Those within did not know the train's destination. They have never heard of Auschwitz.
Yes, so the story is a very moving story. It is about a Jewish family, a typical Jewish family with a mother who is actually crazy about cleanliness. You know, the house has to be spotless. She's keeping a room into which you can never enter because it is always kept extremely clean and extremely well ordered in the house and everything. And then sort of the life goes on. There is a story going on there, and also there are some interesting characters, and the story ends like almost all the stories. It ends with the month of May in 1944. So I'll read it in Romanian. În ziua de 16 mai a anului 1944, doi jandarmi cu pene de cocoș la pălărie, înarmați cu carabine grele și cartușiere de rezervă, pătrunseră în casa familiei Draișpan, cu cizmele lor mari, lustruite reglementar, fără să țină seama de papucii de la intrare. Reli Draișpan, măruntă și slabă, cu părul adunat într-un coc, înalt, deasupra creștetului, Daniel, soțul ei, matahala aceea de om tăcut, și Roni, fiul lor, care tocmai împlinise 19 ani și luase bacalaureatul cu note excepționale, au fost scoși din casa lor curată lună și duși sub escortă la rampa gării și încărcați în niște vagoane de vite cu verestruicele bătute în zgânduri de sârmă ghimpată. Erau în acel transport 43 de vagoane, cu câte 70 de suflete și o găleată cu apă în fiecare vagon, adică în total 3010 suflete. Trenul porni scrâșnind din fiare. Cei dinăuntru nu cunoșteau destinația trenului. N-au auzit niciodată de Auschwitz. This is the end of the story, and it's a very, very sad ending to almost all of the stories. I wish to say that my father didn't consider himself to be a Holocaust writer. He didn't write about the Holocaust. He told me that whatever happened in Auschwitz and in the camps is undescribable. It was beyond what can be put into words. But what he describes is the world that existed before, which was obliterated by the
Holocaust,
by the deportations. Yes.
Yes, and in fact, in both books, I should stress that the wonderful, colourful descriptions, the amazing characters which are brought alive through your father's writing, even though, of course, we know the sad ending of the tales told inside. I don't think that we should shy away from such books, especially now when we perhaps need to remember that times could be far worse than they already are now. So it's a remembrance for us, to remind us, and to remind us of the fortitude and bravery that's needed to get through hard times.
Yes, and you know, my father had a very good sense of humor, and the sense of humanity, and the sense of sometimes even sarcasm, and he could describe whatever was happening there in a very, very moving way, at least to me, for sure. And sort of I grew up with his stories, which became part of the novels and of the short stories that he wrote. And I think one of the interesting things that he describes in these stories is how diverse and multi-ethnic was this town of Sziget. There were people there of various origins and various backgrounds and various religions, and they lived together in a very, very nice way. They contributed to making this town a very interesting and very lively and very beautiful town, in my opinion. And what has happened is that war came and sort of it completely destroyed this fabric of life. And I think this is what my father is describing.
Yes, it's important. These works are important because they're an evocation of this wonderful multiculturalism which was existent at that time in the Carpathian region and in Central Europe. So they're very important. I should just add, Freddie, a little advertisement for you that the book is interspersed with the wonderful sketches that you've made to accompany each story, and that's the same. We have the same thing in the trap. So they all together, it makes a very personal and attractive production. I'm very proud that we've managed to produce these. I am
extremely pleased of the way Istros is publishing the books. They are always very beautiful and pleasant books to hold and to look at. The graphics is wonderfully done. The typesetting is beautiful. Everything about the books, and not only my father's books, but I have several others like Our Daily Bread and the other books from Romanian translations by various other authors. I think you are doing a marvelous job at Istros, and I'm very proud that these books are appearing in Istros.
Thank you, Freddie, and thanks for talking to me today. For anybody listening, you can buy the books, both The Trap and With an Unopened Umbrella in the Pouring Rain are available from the Istros website. They would be available from bookshops if they were open, and of course they're online with Amazon and Waterstones, etc. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.